RWBY Grimm Eclipse, based on the hit web series RWBY, has an interesting problem. Aside from an awesome source material, its best qualities are not what I'd use as selling points, with one of them arguably being a major flaw depending on how you look at it. So with that in mind, how exactly does one recommend a game like this? Grimm Eclipse is a 3D 4-player co-op hack and slash adventure that is almost aggressively mediocre in pretty much every way possible. And while those versed in RWBY's humble beginnings might find this very low-budget beginner's game design charming and even nostalgic, like I do, there's no denying that time has done this game no favors. And that's clearly visible even as early as the opening screens. They're just so plain and basic. If I didn't know better, I'd think we were playing an early 2000s Flash game, which actually makes sense. The first of Grimm Eclipse's major selling points isn't what it brings to the table, but more so how it got there in the first place. The source material, its background, and its history, which obviously doesn't matter to most players just looking to have some fun. So if that's you, feel free to jump ahead to this point in the video for more on the combat, but just know you'll be missing out. So what puts a lot of this game's design in perspective is just how it was created, with it actually starting out as a fan game made by just one guy, Jordan Scott. Of course, as we all well know, copyright is most certainly a thing, and the initial design for this game got pulled pretty quickly. But unlike other companies that just kill off fan projects, Rooster Teeth, a company built by small creators using other franchises' content to make their own, saw the potential here and brought Jordan in to make a full-fledged game.
And major kudos to Rooster Teeth for both not being a massive hypocrite, which honestly is a nice change of pace and should not be as rare as it is, and also for just seeing the potential in small creators. Way to go, guys. No joke here. Bravo.
And as we've seen with other games with similar startups, greatness can come from this. Though, unfortunately, not always. Jumping right in, you can choose to play as any of the 4 members of Team RWBY, or if you've purchased the DLC or are playing the definitive edition on Switch, any of the members of Team Juniper. And once you do, the game drops you straight into the first stage. And what you see is what you get. No tutorials. Barely any story or setup. Nothing. Go fight hordes of Grimm or die trying. And yeah, there's technically a story that is apparently canon, taking place between seasons 2 and 3, but it is just so half-assed. There is no way it'll draw in new players to the series, or even hold the attention of returning fans.
Huge RWBY fan here, and trust me, I couldn't care less about what was happening here.
And the problem isn't even the story itself. Evil scientist does evil stuff in the name of progressing mankind, blah 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 blah. Yeah, we've seen it all before, but the real problem is how it's told. One would hope that with Rooster Teeth backing the game, it'd have cutscenes similar to those of the show, or at least like those small shorts they'd use between episodes. But no, it's all told through radio chatter between the teachers.
Wait, that's illegal.
All of which have more dialogue than our main characters. In fact, you could swap in any character from any series, and it wouldn't really matter that much to the narrative. Which hurts even more as the original voice cast is there to reprise their roles, and end up just getting relegated to only spouting off the same one-liners again and again, like it was an early era PS2 Brawler, which in many ways, it is. Grimm Eclipse is a fast-paced action brawler very akin to games like Dynasty Warriors, with a bit of Devil May Cry in there. Enemies pop up and you pop them. Rinse and repeat until the stage is done, with the occasional, very basic objective to complete, like protecting something from hordes, or beating hordes, or breaking stuff while being attacked by hordes. Did I mention that there's also a horde mode? Graphically, there's just not much to see or do here beyond smacking down batches of Grimm that get in the way. And while the area with the red grass really does look cool, points for that, stages are just pretty barren, and that's about it. But coming from what was originally a one-man indie team, plus that is kinda how the source material was anyway, we're gonna go ahead and just let that slide. Because Grimm Eclipse really is all about the combat, and it certainly has its highs and lows. Combat itself is very simple, but in a way that's really hard to describe. Looking at it, the action appears to be fast-paced and epic, and there are definitely moments when it is. But it's just too simple. It's rarely ever engaging, especially early on. Each character has a fast and heavy attack, both of which can be used mid-air and combined for combos. You can also charge up the heavy attack for major damage, as well as unleash your special attack once it's ready. You've also got a short dash for getting close or escaping, which helps since your health recovers Master Chief style. And spamming it is a way faster way to travel the longer distances, and there's also an interrupt action for when enemies blatantly signal that they are wide open. Landing the interrupt will stun foes, and if you're playing co-op, your allies will get a prompt for a powerful team attack. Zero emphasis on team, by the way, as it's more of a setup and follow through than an actual team attack. Or players could just follow up themselves, assuming of course that you actually notice it while jumping around, as the camera is surprisingly stiff. You'd think it was a fixed camera with how little it moves, making it harder to navigate the battlefield than it really needs to be, and once again giving off that early PS2 vibe. And of course, as every RWBY fan knows, every weapon is also a gun. Awesome. Which can stun foes after just a few shots. And that's basically everything. While each character does feel different enough to warrant trying them all out to see who best suits you, there really isn't a huge difference between them. At least, not enough to warrant multiple playthroughs. The game also tries to mix things up by throwing in level ups and unlockable skills for each character, but they are just minor adjustments at best and don't really make much of an impact. And sadly, neither does the music. Now, I just want to point out that I am a huge fan of the RWBY soundtrack.
I even own a physical copy.
But for whatever reason, they barely use it. I honestly thought they didn't have the license at first. And while the tracks they do play are fine in their own right, the fact that battle music doesn't play during all of the battles, which is like 99% of this game, having slower, more ambient tracks that you'd expect to hear when you're, say, exploring, playing during an all-out brawl, really does hurt the momentum. Not helped by the combat just getting repetitive really quick, particularly early on as the enemies are extremely one-note. Every enemy only has about one or two very basic attack patterns, and new foes are introduced so slowly, so it takes a while before fights start to get varied at all. But when they do, and the tracks start going hard, that is when the game starts showing its true potential. The fighting can absolutely be fun and frantic. You got your squad by your side, you're slaying baddies, the music is rocking, it is easy to lose yourself in the action. And the best example is definitely the final boss. The only boss fight, by the way, because it is awesome. You're running around, dodging aerial attacks, gunfire, spikes, dropping henchmen, red like roses is blaring, all while fighting a giant Grimm. This is what I wanted from the game. Pity though that these moments are so far and few in between, with most of it coming towards the very end when the full variety of enemies are on the board. But it can still be mindless fun the whole way through if you've got your buddies by your side. As I mentioned before, this game's big selling points aren't what I'd lead with. But here's the second one. The gameplay doesn't require you to really focus all that much, and the co-op is online only, unless you have the definitive edition, which has local co-op. So if you're looking to just chill and chat with your friends, but you still want something to do while you chat, RWBY Grimm Eclipse is just simple enough to let you do that, while still engaging enough that you won't get bored.
Some selling point, right?
Personally, playing with my buddy, I did enjoy this game, but it's really hard to recommend. Still, I do think there is a place for these kinds of mid to low level games where there's nothing particularly bad or broken or inherently frustrating about it. But there's also nothing that really stands out about it either, aside from its namesake and maybe a small handful of cool moments. If you've got the right friends to play with, I think you'll have a good time. Especially if you're all RWBY fans and just want to joke around. But otherwise, it's not really worth it, especially at full retail price, and definitely, absolutely not if you're playing alone, even if you are a RWBY fan.